Alright, it should be recording. It appears to be working. Alright, this is a response video, of course. That's what I've been doing lately. Get back to regular physics videos, I suppose. Conversation really is important, but obviously you can't have a coherent one with most people. They're just incapable of paying any attention at all, it seems. But anyway, Piero made a response to Hoffladay on this, and it titled the video, Which Way Experiment Plus. So as if he was responding to the point raised by Hoffladay, I think articulated plain enough that there's one particular part of the quantum story where they talk about doing an experiment where they detect which slit the photon goes through to figure out whether it went through this side or that side, right? And then they talk about unplugging the detector and how that somehow creates a quantum effect, that there's some new mystery created, that somehow the photons behave in some different way, blah, blah, blah. And that's the story. And that's the story been told for decades. So long before they could shoot atoms into two slits, which again is really complicated, right? Because people who know something about the atmosphere and everything else, you'd have to do it in an evacuated chamber. Because if you know anything about ballistics, say if you shoot bullets at a low velocity, they don't go straight. So you have to have high velocity to keep something on a straight path when it goes through atmosphere, because atmosphere has a lot of scatter. It'll force it to scatter, essentially. And so it's kind of a difficult experiment to do, this whole shooting of atoms. But anyway, all of these stories were told long before anybody did the experiment with actual atoms. So you can't use the atom thing. Now, if somebody has evidence where they detected which slit the atoms went through, that's fine with me. Show me that. But that doesn't explain why they were telling the story when all they did this experiment with were photons and electrons. Now what Hoffladay is asking for, what I'm asking for, the only experiment I deny, is the experiment where they actually did this detecting. Okay, I'm saying it never happened because theoretically it can't happen. That's one good reason. And the second reason, it never happened. It was never actually performed. It was just a thought experiment. They somehow turned it into a real experiment. And it never took place. And so they're projecting, they're predicting, essentially. Quantum mechanics is predicting what will happen, but it doesn't show it happening. And they do this all the time with the idea of blocking one of the slits, and then they pretend that there's just a lump of light that goes through, when we already know from Newton, all the way back to Newton, that you can't do that. That expectation is completely ridiculous. The smaller you make the slit, you get, when the slit's wide, you get no pattern, but you get a very bright dot. And then as you make it narrower, you get more pattern. A lot of pattern starts to happen. And the pattern keeps stretching. So as you make the slit smaller and smaller, you make the bars in the pattern bigger and bigger, okay? But they're still there. They're just really big, okay? So you have to move your target closer if you want to keep it on your target, because the diffraction is so great when you get the slit really, really small. But it has to be insanely small. Not the 1/10 of a millimeter that we're doing these experiments traditionally with something that might be a 1/10 or a 20th of a millimeter. Those slits create lots of pattern with the single slit. That's just a fact. And they just ignore that fact. So that's a peripheral subject. But I mean, it's so overt in all of these fake explanations of the experiment. So all of these false explanations of the history and these false explanations of what the experiment does exist. And one of the most outstanding false statements is the statement that somehow they detected which slit the photons went through. They made detectors. They tried to detect. And when they tried to detect, the pattern went away and somehow there was less diffraction, which on its face can't make any sense to anybody reasonable, because they know, well, if you're detecting, that means you're disturbing, which means you're going to make more pattern, not less pattern. You're going to make more spreading, not less spreading. So again, this is theoretical nonsense. They routinely say it. All of the physicists I've played, almost every single one of them doing it. Feynman, making the silly lines. Even though Feynman admitted that he pointed out, well, you can't really detect a photon. He didn't say it about electrons, but he certainly said it about a photon. I think he might have said it about electrons, I'm not sure. But he did the same silly drawing. Now, the guy at Yale, I showed him doing the same silly drawing. Then you can go into the other talking head stuff and the rest of the videos on YouTube. I've played them. I've shown the videos. I don't know what else I can do. I can only show them saying stuff that theoretically makes no sense, and there's no evidence that it ever was done. So it's clearly being stated there's no evidence that it was done. Hathaway saying there's no evidence of this experiment. He's saying, until you show it to me. He said, even in the video, he said, I was trying to got you in Mendham to shut him the fuck up, and I couldn't got him because I couldn't find it either. So he stated that in the video Pirro's responding to. And what does Pirro do? He does exactly the same thing. He pretends he can't understand this is about one particular claim being made. Not the claim that there's a double slit pattern. And he's going all the way back to nursery school in terms of he's sitting here pretending that we need to be told what the experiment creates. And he does even that so poorly. He does it worse than the criminals we're talking about in terms of saying it so naively, pretending that it's diffraction with a single slit when we know it's an interference pattern. We know that's exactly why they had to create Huygens. If it was just diffraction, if the beam just spread, then nobody would have an argument here. But clearly there's bars. So there's one slit and you end up with bars. And you have to explain how the photon possibly went through one slit and interfered with itself. So he doesn't even understand any of this quantum mechanic theory. None of it. He has zero understanding, you'd almost have to argue. To be talking this, to be this inaccurate on the nursery school version of the experiment. So anyway, I won't post this video until I'll wait and see what Hathaway does. Because if he does his usual duplicitous hypocrisy move, he'll pretend Pirro didn't do something insanely offensive here, that he was completely evasive, that the question was clearly presented. I mean, it couldn't have. At first he's calling me a liar, he's calling me a flat earther, he's saying I'm denying real hard facts, he's making direct accusations, and he can't back them up. He can't even understand what experiment I'm claiming didn't take place. He's this stupid? No, the real answer is exactly what I've said many times in the past. There's no point in talking to Pirro because Pirro only hears 1/50th of the words you speak. So there's no way he can understand what you said because he only hears 1/50th of the words. So he hears blah, 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 zi, blah, blah. So it's like Charlie Brown talk or something. He pays absolutely zero attention to what the person's actually saying, and he just waits till a trigger word hits his brain, and that's it. So one out of 20 words will trigger him, and that's all he hears is those words. So he's speed listening, whatever he's doing, but he's not comprehending a damn thing, and that's the real problem. He pays no attention to a person's argument. He just creates his own fairy tale of what they said.
And I just added notes in here. I left some comments because I thought it wasn't going to be part of the same series, but it was, so I just added into my notes. And then
I have this sped up quite a bit, so I will attempt to paraphrase where it may be garbled.
One of the other videos, or maybe one of those two, I was going to make a separate video. I'm just going to put it in here. So this is a mini intro video. About the which way experiment and being invited to...
Okay, about the which way experiment. So at least he got that part right. Again, as I stated, I never called it that. So when Pirro was calling me a liar, I never called it a which-way experiment. I just said they never detected photons or electrons because they can't. And so they never unplugged the detector they never made. Clearly.
To show you. You don't deny that it's been done, like Gary, you say.
You don't deny that it hasn't been done. Well, he's saying there's no evidence that it's been done. I mean, that's pretty close to the same thing I'm saying. What's the difference? Did I say something other than that? I'm saying, there's no evidence that it's been done. Hothliday's saying there's no evidence that it's been done. Now, maybe there's a subtle difference in how he worded it. What? But what's the difference in the statement? Aren't those the same frickin' statement? There's no evidence that the experiment has been done. Why are they claiming an experiment that hasn't been done, that there's no evidence has been done? That doesn't smell right for scientists to be doing that. Hothliday's implying, well, it seems like maybe they are guilty of a little bit of a crime here.
But you have your suspicions about it or whatever.
Or whatever, yeah. Well, he's conceding to my argument that he can't defeat me with evidence because he doesn't have any.
The data isn't that easy.
Well, I don't know. Again, it's really not that complicated. I'm just saying if somebody's made an electron or a photon, passive electron or photon detector, then I don't see what's so complicated about the data. It should be in an encyclopedia of inventions.
I would disagree with one thing where you say Gary's done the experiment, just shining a laser through.
Gary's done the experiment, right. So just shining a laser through a slit manufactured exactly for the purpose, which I did. I mean, there are slits actually made for the exact purpose of shining a laser through them to get the pattern. You know. No, that's not good enough. Yeah, I did it all kinds of ways. I shine it through razor blades. I shine it through lots of things. And then somebody sent me the actual manufactured for the purpose slits, and I shined it through them too. Oh, no, that's not doing the experiment. But again, what does it have to do with the which way thing? It has absolutely nothing to do. I didn't claim I did the which way experiment on my porch. I didn't claim I had an electron detector or a photon detector. I didn't even claim I could do the electron experiment anyway.
Slits is a big experiment that would involve some measurement of it.
So just some more jargon. It requires you to do measurement to see a frickin' on-off pattern. That requires you to do measurements. Where does this have anything to do with measurements? It has to do with whether or not there's a pattern and what causes the pattern. I mean, doing measurements isn't going to tell you what caused the pattern, I'm afraid. It really isn't going to do that. What you ought to do, what they ought to do, okay, as I've suggested before, is put a pattern in, in terms of have a pattern built into the light, a picture of Donald Duck or something, shine a projection into the two slits, and then see if the projection ends up in the different locations, because that might indicate to them that this, wave interference, yeah, that's horse shit.
Anyway, I'm just going to reproduce real quick when I saw you say that. I just did a real quick search.
I just did a real quick search, so yeah. So I'll make real accusations about somebody's character. I'll impugn their character, call them liars and deniers, based on absolutely no already in your pocket evidence. And you'll do a search and not. Well, let's just watch how pitiful this search is.
I wrote down. So first.
Like we couldn't do that. Like Hothliday, so, Hothliday won't take this as a grotesque insult to his intelligence, but Pirro has to explain to Hothliday how to type double slit into Google. Yeah, Hothliday needs that instruction.
Oh no, that's not it.
So let's just understand. He's made direct accusations based on nothing. He has no knowledge of the experiment. He has no reason to keep claiming it was done when it hasn't been done, and he just keeps doing it. And if this isn't unacceptably rude, I just don't know what else is. I mean, how rude can you get?
First I did which way experiment?
Again, which I wouldn't have used as a title because it gets into entanglement experiments, but whatever, fine.
Let's see. Then I thought, hey, what about if I look at the images, because you want data. So I went through here, and, this looks like that's some data, but mostly it's diagrams and stuff.
So you want data about detectors. So he didn't type the word detecting in there. Detecting photons, detecting electrons. So this is just, again, this is like somehow he's going to explain to us that there's a pattern called the double slit pattern. Yeah, we know about that, Piro. Again, how much of an insult to our intelligence is this? To pretend me and Hathliday are having a conversation about whether the double slit pattern exists. That's somehow a controversy. No, that's not the controversy. And everybody listening to any of these videos knows that's not the controversy. And yet Piro's claiming to be an authority on this conversation, and yet he has no clue. Because he pays no attention. He has no idea what my theory is. He has no idea what I claim. He has a deluded pile of nothing, mush in his head, where he heard 10 words I spoke, and that's all he has. He's registered 10 words, and those 10 words, deny experiment. That's all he knows. I claim an experiment hasn't been done. That means I claim every experiment ever done was never done.
Stuff here, this looks, I don't know, is that data? Looks simulated, right? This maybe, but probably also simulated. So okay, and I thought you can. This is a trick I mentioned to people before, but there's a bunch of things you can type in with Google. And one of them was
yeah. So this is just so freaking good. Oh yeah, this is just exactly what I was asking for. Is to somebody do the search I did that didn't work? Thank you for repeating exactly what I did, except doing it even worse than I did it.
So there's a site colon, like .edu. And then it'll just get things from .edu. Right? So you can do .co-op as well. You could do, Wikipedia.
Yeah, you could look at what the title bar says in it, and you can see what you can search for, and it's even easier because then you can just modify the search terms in the actual URL. It's even easier to do it there.
Okay, this is a little tangent. I'm not saying go here for this particular data. I'm just saying, look, these are all Wikipedia.org. So you can target it. And if you do .edu, you get schools. That includes, grammar schools, high schools, all kinds of stuff. But again, a lot of setups for things, and some things that look like they might be data. And I thought, well,
so the same propaganda that I'm arguing is propaganda, and so he's going to the propaganda engine, which is the grammar school or high school version of the story, which is always inaccurate. So again, let's go to the inaccurate source. The most inaccurate of all possible sources is educational material.
What is this? How about two-slit data? Because that's what you want to see. Sounds like you want
so now he's changed the search, right? Two-slit data. So now we don't even have which way anymore. So now we're completely off the subject of detecting which slit the photon went through. So we have no hope on this search.
Pictures of it. So, I only looked at this level, but I see already, okay, so like this looks like data. Let's see here. One thing is I'm really good at searching the internet. The snake.
Oh yeah, this is his claim. Oh yeah, I'm really good at searching the internet. Look, I got a picture of a snake with a hat. Isn't that cute? Amazing.
There's a snake over here. I'm not good at pointing. That's a result of one day when I had my best idea where I just thought, what if we search for snakes with hats? Wasn't sure what I would get, but
Yeah, that's really a complicated thing to do. Put in the word snakes with hat into Google. Wow, you're really sophisticated.
It's awesome. So two slits, one photon at a time with a lot of, this is for students. And so you have to look in here to see if they claim this is data. Obviously it looks like real data, like here.
Yes, they, in high schools they have all kinds of photon detectors and electron detectors. They have them all sitting all over the place. So this is an image of the single slit pattern, as obviously it never appears this way. So this is obviously not real data because no single slit ever does this. So it's obviously not real data because you can't make that happen. It's physically not possible to make that happen with the same size slits that cause the double slit pattern. So if you're getting a double slit pattern like this, you can't create this out of those size slits. You just can't do it.
So here's the...
I mean, it says...
Both slits are open. And
it says right here, photon counting data for single and double slit configurations. Again, can't... Theoretically, you can understand that can't be true. It's not the pattern you get. It's not what even the math says for the single slit, because the central maxima clearly has to be a much higher peak than this, even if you were to get just plain diffraction. But clearly, well, you can get a little indication. See, you know, this is a little bit of the cheat. You can see a little indication of it going back up over here. Right over here, see it? It's going back up again. So what they've done is compress the image. All right, they've taken the single slit pattern, and they're viewing it, only this part of it. So they've spread it and then pretended that this is the only part that existed. So you can see the edges going back up. Both of them are going back up. So they've just eliminated essentially the single slit pattern by focusing on the middle of it, and that's it. They've compressed the data.
These two arms are really just one or the other slit is open. Look, you don't actually see a lot of the diffraction because diffraction is really hard to see and only really happens during sharp.
So again, he's using the word diffraction. So I wish, you know, look, Piero obviously isn't paying any attention to my videos. So I wish Hofladay would maybe use some of these words that I've pointed out. Now, Hofladay's probably seen the video where I played the Professor Lewin clip. I mean, I've done it twice now. I really don't want to do it 3 times. But where Professor Lewin overtly states there's no diffraction and interference. These patterns are always interference patterns. They are not some kind of diffraction pattern. Diffraction just spreads light. It doesn't create patterns. The pattern has to be created by interference.
When the wavelength is about the width of the slit. Whereas you get a lot of strong interference no matter what. 2 slits because... Well, not no matter what, I mean, it changes and you can blur out.
So this is obviously, again, this is compressed data. Obviously, the 2-slit pattern has the 2 patterns. So it has this, and then it goes dead for a little while, and then it has another bunch of bars, and then another bunch of bars, and this has another bunch of bars, and then another bunch of bars. So this is, again, quote mining the data.
But it's a lot stronger because it's the waves are the same wavelength going through it. So, you know, that... plus that, if they were both open, should be, you know, a bump kind of like this, a little bit flat at the top, like that. But also, look, they're both about this tall, so they would go twice as tall. They'd only be about that tall up there. So why does this one go that high? Well, because all of this missing light in here.
And again, this just has nothing to do with the reality. Like I said, you can do the experiment yourself, and you put a single slit. You can't... the only way you can make the pattern this wide is you have to make the slit infinitesimally small. That so few photons are going through that you can hardly even see the pattern. So to get it to spread that much, all right, you have to create a slit that's, you know, finer than a hair.
In these troughs, it gets focused like, you know, a magnifying glass focus. So that light gets moved over to these positions, and so these become brighter. Then any one spot down here could be...
Okay, so again, he's just all this gibberish about somehow we don't know what the double slit pattern is, and the whole point is the which way, detecting which opening the photon went through. It's about detection and turning detectors off. That's the claim made. And he's just not paying any attention whatsoever to the actual claim, and instead just doing this nonsense that somehow because I claim a specific experiment wasn't done, I'm claiming every experiment wasn't done. It's just, and again, that's not an egregious misrepresentation. It's not an egregious mistake, if we're going to call it a mistake. This isn't an egregious mistake.
Both slits are open. And yet some places get really dark. If these two were added together, you'd think that you'd get a signal with them both open up here, where it's the light from both of them added together. But it's not. It's a wave interference instead. So let's see what else there is. I'm just saying that this is a way to find stuff. Here's something.
This is a way to find stuff. So this is how he responds to the accusation that there's no evidence that the experiment was ever done. This is how he shows that the experiment was done. Google it.
Yeah. Call it your booster. A17, this is probably another statement. See, we got real stuff, results.
Again, these images are so far from what you actually see when you do the experiment. So let's understand, you get 40, 50, 60 bars. Huge amounts of pattern. And look, this is how they always demonstrate it, which is just silly. Because there's obviously no huge degrade in the brightness of the bars. None of that shit happens.
So here the dots are the data points, no clean data. This curve is what they predicted, I guess.
And again, you can't make photons do that. You just can't do it. They will create the other bumps. So again, this is just quote mining the data. You can't make it not create these other. The other bumps are here. They're just not showing them. They're here because you can't do it. You can't do it. If you make it so you stretch the centrum maxima so thin that you can't see the extra bars, you won't see the central maxima either.
I guess he doesn't. So have you been through all of this stuff? I mean,
so again, let's understand. He titled it "Which Way." This has nothing to do with which weighing at all. I just, how can you get any worse than this?
I was walked through it in college. I would think that a local school, you might, yeah, like you said, be able to do this yourself.
Yeah, you might be able to detect photons and detect electrons flying by yourself. Sure. You could do that at any university. They all have photon detectors. So,
other than this kind of thing, you want to slam dunk findings? Because I don't have a good history of, if I find diffraction in water, which isn't very easy to show because all that.
If I find diffraction in water, which isn't very easy to show. Well, here, it's right. Here's an image of it for you, Piero. So here's the double slit pattern, and they're claiming these are nice straight waves coming out of each slit. Nice straight, reliable waves out of each slit. Now, how come when it's a single slit, you're saying they're not nice straight waves? They're totally interference waves and diffraction waves. So how do you have it both ways? So if I just move those two slits a little further away, he's arguing that that pattern breaks down, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of interference patterns. Does that make any logical sense to any of you assholes? That all I have to do is move those two slits away from each other, and then the single slits will interfere with themselves? I mean, can you people be any more dishonest? I mean, how dishonest can you be? Is that the question to ask? Really? Will you show me? Can you go a step lower than this? How low will you go in being just so fucking dishonest?
The noise that you get in a water tank doesn't convince people very much. I mean, this data is out there, so...
This data, right, this data that has absolutely, I mean, it really can't be any further from the subject, right? I mean, it's like, let's find an analogy. We're talking about cars, and we're talking about the durability of the rubber and temperature on the tires. And he starts showing us videos of how to clean your windshield. I mean, it's nowhere even close to the subject, really. Yes, it's both about cars, but that's as close as it gets. It's nowhere close to on the subject.
Maybe you should cite that as you. Granted, paying for a journalists are expensive, but, Nature.
Yeah, pay for a journal. Like somewhere the journal has the special photon detector and the electron detector, and we don't know anything about it. The journal keeps all of it private, and everybody keeps all the information private. They have this special photon detector, and they did the experiment, and they unplugged it, and they just never published. That's all. Fuck.
Go through Nature has actual scientific papers. They might not have stuff recently. That's why you're seeing, students doing it because it's considered.
Yeah, so again, you're saying, how can he get, just it's just so bad. I mean, you can't have conversation with people who can't pay attention. They can't get any. I mean, he's so, like I said, he's so off the target. I mean, it's like pissing in the opposite direction of the toilet. I mean, he's just not even close.
The demonstration now, it's been, the people doing it in the lab are doing really weird, quantum erasure stuff. But really the question would be, what kind of data would you want to see? Because this is the whole point right here.
Evidence, just evidence of a paper, any documentation pointing to the fact that they did an experiment where they at least attempted to detect which slit the energy went through, whether it was a photon or an electron. Some experiment that shows they tried to detect which slit the energy went through in the photon or the electron experiment. And then, whatever detector they were using, they unplugged it, and somehow the pattern stayed broken, right? Or something like that. I mean, I can't remember. I mean, the story is just kind of silly. Like somehow photons know when it's plugged in or not plugged in. Some kind of crap like that. I mean, one version is you record it on a tape, right? That's how old the story is. You record it on your recording tape, but you never play the tape. And if you never play the tape, the result is one way. But if you play the tape, the results change. Woo! Yeah, that's the woo I'm talking about. Never happened.
This guy. This is what each slit does. If you added them together like that, it should be right up here.
Right. So let's understand Newton, 350 years ago, would say, no, that's not what light does when you put it through a slit. Sorry, wrong answer. I mean, the rings are named after me. The pattern is actually named after me. All right, so how are you making this mistake? I'm the most famous scientist in the universe ever, the most brilliant man that ever lived, and yet you could get something so fucking wrong?
It'd just be a hump, but it comes out like this. I mean, I don't know what more there is to say.
Okay. So you're just saying. So the words "which way" it just went right over his head, right? Those words flew right over his head, right? And all he thinks is there's an argument about whether there's a double slit pattern. Even though I've done the experiment on my porch, what does he think I got as results on my porch? Do you think I got no pattern? What does he actually think, this lunatic? So he's making accusations. He hasn't watched my videos. He's paid no attention to what I'm saying, and yet he's degrading me and insulting me. I mean, how foul a human can you be? And he's such a fucking coward, to be making these accusations from complete ignorance. Complete ignorance. I mean, this is a pure demonstration of just how fucking ignorant he is, and yet he will pontificate on a subject he is this fucking ignorant on. Amazing that anybody thinks this is a fair game, that this asshole should be anything but you should be spitting on this jackass. Who the fuck can defend this nonsense? Who? Which one of you weasels can defend this stupid, inane argument he's making?
It's a trying. But that's the data up here that I showed her, this one. That's what it shows. The same phenomena. And is that diffraction the same as interference pattern? Well, it's the same.
So he's arguing a point that, frankly, the rest of the quantum physicists obviously don't believe, They don't think there's a difference between diffraction and interference. So right there, he's already fucked, They're like Professor Lewin said, the old book might say the word diffraction, but It's the same damn thing. You can't play this game that diffraction creates an on-off pattern. Diffraction causes spreading. It doesn't cause on-off. To do on-off, you need interference. Duh. Fuck.
Same kind of effect, but the pattern is the same. Diffraction lines, are almost impossible to see. So, Gary would call this a lie.
Yes, that's a lie. That's right. I can't make a photon do that. I can't make a photon just make a nice little spreaded pattern and that's it. It always creates the extra humps, and all you're doing is taking the pattern and spreading it, right? So obviously you can quote mine. You can take a picture of something, like I can take a picture of an elephant and pretend elephants don't have any eyes, because I just take a picture with the, in between the two eyes and say, look, elephants are blind. I can do that, but would anybody believe me or say I'm credible? No, that's a nonsense perception of what a single slit does. A single slit creates just as much pattern as the double slit, just as much pattern. And it's just a lie to imply it does something different, and it's a lie going all the way back to Isaac fuck Newton. Newton already proved it. You're already cooked on that nonsense argument that it's just diffraction. It's not just diffraction. It's clearly more than diffraction.
Because it's just supposed to have these, it depends how much they're narrow, and it depends on the width of the slit. So
no, it depends on the width of your target, frankly. Because, again, you can't do it, all right? I've tried to do it. I've tried to make the pattern so there's no pattern. No, it's always there. It's just spreading wider and wider and wider.
Don't necessarily see them. They're not as sharp as these ones when you have two waves. Because diffraction is basically a wave interfering with itself when it's cut off.
So, again, he's now claiming diffraction is a wave cut off from itself. None of that's true. So, again, just more nonsense about what the word diffraction means. And again, he's claiming all these words are wave words. Somehow you can't say the word diffraction if you're using it in the context of diffraction would be a certain kind of deflection. Refraction would be a certain kind of deflection. They're all just deflection phenomenon. The course is changed.
Off on either end. So I think you can find some data. And if you really want me to find you more specific data, then what's the challenge? Because if I go find it...
So he says, what's the challenge, right? Now, I mean, it was kind of clear on Hothliday's video, it's this which way phenomenon. Now, I guess Hothliday had to spell it out, and he had to say, well, it's the idea that you detected which slit a photon went through or detected which slit an electron went through. That's the experiment they claim was done, so why don't you show me evidence of that experiment being done?
I want it to be like, this counts as a slam dunk. What do I have to show?
So this counts as a slam dunk. What do I have? What more do you need? This is completely off the subject. I showed you how to clean your windshield with a bottle of Windex. So didn't I just explain thermodynamics of tire rubber? Aren't those the same subject?
Is this what we're trying to show? These two one-slit humps add up into this wavy thing, and there's no, this should be simple.
Wavy thing. So again, he's still denying that single slits create the wavy thing. He still doesn't understand that there's really no difference. Single slits, lots of pattern. Double slit, lots of pattern, and it depends on how wide and narrow the slits are. If I make the slits very, 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 very narrow, I'll ruin the double slit pattern too.
Simple arithmetic, the light from one and the light from the other, just add together. So not be any of this subtraction stuff.
Yes, and again, this is one of the lies. So let's understand the two arguments here. The first argument is they say they made detectors and detected electrons, and then they turned the detectors off. Right, now that's one story. The second story is this traditional single slits do this, when you can't make a single slit do that. And you certainly can't make a single slit that's the same size you used for the double slit. That is, the same size opening you used for the double slit will not do this. It won't.
And this thing should be here, not 3 or 4 times higher. So, okay, so that's that one. Alright, so we started off this video with the other one I already dealt with.
Okay, so that's all. That's all we got. Somehow we didn't make it clear enough. So he ignored the words which way, and pretended he answered a question he didn't even come close to, even not even on the subject. The subject is detectors and turning detectors on and off and having the pattern change. Somehow the pattern gets straighter when I have the detector on. Somehow I make the beam go straighter when I turn on something that's making energy noises. Yeah. All right. So this, so we'll see what Hoffladay does with this inane pile of rubbish. That if it, I would argue, if this was presented by any other asshole on YouTube as a response to what Hoffladay said, he would say, "You're just too pathetic. How can I have a conversation with somebody this pathetic? How much do I have to spell it out for you? Do I actually have to type the words on the screen? What do I have to do so you understand the point being made? Didn't I make it clear enough for you? I mean, what do I actually have to do? How do I have to draw you a picture? Will that be good? If I draw you a picture of detectors trying to detect electrons, could you maybe, and then I could show a plug and you unplug it and you plug it in? Just show him the Dr. Quantum video. Again, I could just, again, like I said, he hasn't watched any of my videos. So all of the accusations I've made, he hasn't paid any attention to them and is pretending I'm claiming double slit patterns don't happen, which is just a grotesque lie. I mean, it's such a misrepresentation of everything said in my videos and everything done in my videos. I present the pattern as done, the experiment as done by Professor Lewin, by whatever authority I can find doing it, by Veritasium, by all kinds of people. I present the actual experiments being done. And this insane liar is sitting there claiming that somehow I'm denying those experiments when I showed them. So what's the penalty for this, Hoffladay? There's no penalty for this kind of abuse? So we'll see what his reaction will be. So I won't post this. We'll give him time. I have the feeling that he's he's going to evade the subject, but we'll see. He'll just say, "Oh, no, I don't know. I can't even imagine how he can find this at all excusable, because it's just such an insult to both of our times. I mean, all of this crap." 5 years of argument, and you still haven't figured out what the argument is? Too pathetic. Alright, so that's enough. Guess you don't need to see this. It's a little bit of my Java script. Well, it's not really, it's just HTML, actually. So anyway, yeah, it's blocking me. So, till the next time, and such, and so forth and whatnot.